All right, everybody ready? Are you ready to
partay?
partay?
Hopefully. Hopefully.
Hopefully. Hey, it's your birthday.
It's my birthday.
Yeah.
And what are you doing for your birthday? More filming.
More filming. Well, happy birthday, Brian.
Thank you. Thank you. 98 and counting.
Yeah.
He
375.
laughs. That's right.
It's awesome. So, all right, this segment is called You Are What You Think About Most of the Time.
Okay.
So, take it away, my friend.
So, let's see. What were we talking about? We were talking about,
Yeah.
that was this morning, right? We were just
Yep.
sort of having that conversation about, people will do this technique with, and we've seen it in a lot of other people's videos and even, obviously written in their books as well, mostly around finance and things like that. It's a really clear example of that, right? And basically what does it mean? It means you're saturating your mind, and everything that you do with information about what you're trying to achieve.
Right.
So, but, for me, it's like I always take it a little bit further because, again, it's always been my idea that none of this stuff is new, right? So the finance guys have picked it up for something, for their industry, right? And other people have done it for other things as well. And but these are all old techniques, really old, ancient techniques. They're
Right.
mostly esoteric techniques because how do you saturate yourself? How do you get into the state of mind and accelerate your learning curve?
Yeah.
Without a lot of written material back in the day, right? And so it's just your teachers back and forth, and then you'd be sent out to do things again, like we talked about before. So,
Right. And the other aspect of it too was that we were saying that with this, the difference between this program and other programs that makes it challenging to organize all the material is that it's not like an external process where it's
Right.
like go here, do this, set this part up, then put this information in here or fill out this template, and then this is all internal. So it's like what's our compass for how to progress through all this stuff.
Right, and I do a lot of thinking about that because it's very difficult, right? The material itself is by nature amorphous, right? So it's like we can read or listen to other people describe their experiences, but a lot of that is subjective, right? So, and I think, what I've come up with is, at least from a tricky point of view, is that we're trying to combine, both territories. And what I mean by that is that a lot of what we do is subjective, but we're using objective markers to measure the outcome. So it's like, it's not like you just think if it's if we use the example of the finance guys, right? It's not like, I'm putting in my mind all these things and I feel more wealthy. So, I am more wealthy. And, we're always looking for, they would be saying, no, if you let me see your bank account, basically. That's when I know objectively that you're more wealthy and that you've put these practices, put them into use, right? As opposed to just thinking about them on the couch and thinking I'm more wealthy. Oh yes, I feel rich. I feel I'm, the rich and famous or whatever. I'm watching those shows and I'm doing these motivational things and I'm learning about finance and banking and starting businesses and doing that, but I'm not doing anything. It doesn't count, right? So, and the same thing with us. I mean, in a way, right? I mean, they're going through and putting those things in their mind and saturating their system with finance, let's say, to promote their success, but they're looking for an objective marker on the end, right? The destination is
Right.
to actually be successful, to actually be have more wealth or whatever level of wealth that you're trying to achieve, right? And so they have a marker that's objective to everyone around them. And for us, it's slightly different, but in some ways, not so much. We're looking for objective markers too. It's just that our objective markers, depending on what things we're going for, like say in the 4 pillars, right? So it's like, we can see an objective marker in our success. We can see an objective marker in our relationships. We can see an objective marker in our health, right? But again, when we get to that spirituality, what are our objective markers for that? And in some areas, do we need them? Like, do I need, and is it even possible to prove to somebody, that, you can see, energy? For me, it doesn't really, there's always that part in the beginning that you want to prove to somebody. You want that outside approval that, yes, or verification that you can do that. How are you going to do that? There is no objective verification that you can do that. So, we come back to the point of, if you can do that, what are the end results, that you're going to achieve by being able to do that? And so everybody's a little bit different with that. But that being the case, I mean, how do we saturate ourselves with that information? With that information, first, it's getting anything that we can read, to sort of educate us. It's programs like this, it's and then engaging it throughout the day, I think, is one of the best ways, again, because you are what you think about most of the time. And so it's not just, even if you were so fortunate or so disciplined that you could carve out an hour in the morning and an hour at the end of the day to do practices, it would still, in my opinion, not be as good as doing small increments throughout the day and sort of constantly putting it in the forefront of your mind on a regular basis throughout your normal day, whatever that is, because that's going to keep it. There's that idea of attenuation, right, where it's like you're tapping on something, let's say with a bell, and as it fades off into the distance, it's just that your ability to hear that sound is diminished. But it's not that vibration ever really goes away. It continues on, as far as we know, infinitely, just in a more dispersed fashion, right? So, and if we can, ping on that through the course of the day, you're hitting that bell through the course of the day, you start to actually, hear that tone for longer and longer periods of time. That's something that people can do and try as an experiment, and it seems like, wow, the more that I tune myself to that frequency, how much of it is just an internal hearing of that in my mind, so to speak, and how much of it is actually that am I increasing my ability to hear that specific tone, resonating out for longer periods of time. And my thing is, does it really matter? It's more that you're able to do that, and the effect is achieved, more continuously. And so the same thing with this, how do we imbibe these things through the day, and how do we saturate our minds with these techniques so that we can achieve the goal, whatever your goal is, quicker and more efficiently, more effectively. And so in that idea, it's like you think of yourself already as being able to do the thing that you're trying to achieve.
Right. Which we talked about, assuming the God form.
Right, assuming the God form. It's that, and also just, rather than that real formal practice, it's through the day just affirming to yourself that you can see, and what would that be like, and sort of, it's not just a daydreaming, but it's like that will sort of cue you into, if I have 30 seconds, can I put myself into a quicker state of relaxation and gazing so that I can see for 5 seconds, this plant, or or whatever,
right.
Pick your poison, whatever object it is, they all carry some kind of energetic signature, right? So And you're constantly doing that through the day, so that, again, both your conscious mind and your subconscious mind is saturated with the idea and the ability, and your subconscious is tweaking itself constantly and trying to, the feedback loop is constantly trying to say, okay, there's more of this or there's more of that. It's sort of like utilizing that idea that give a man a hammer and everything becomes a nail. Usually that's shown as a negative, right? And in this case, it's a positive, right? You're constantly sort of applying that principle, whether you think that your ability is up there or not, you're assuming that it is, and so you're constantly putting that out there, constantly putting it out there.
And I would say, like, even does it not, it works just as well, even if you're not necessarily trying to put yourself in the feeling of that, or trying to force yourself to believe that or think that that's true or whatever, but that you're even just like saturating your mind with thoughts about that thing, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
It's sort of the same idea with lucid dreaming, right? It's like, you're constantly through the day. Like when you have that initial experience, it's not necessary to tell anybody to keep doing it. You're just thinking about that all day long because it's such an amazing event, right?
Yeah.
And at least the first time. And that can last for days. And of course, what does that do? That it spurs on more of that ability, right? Because you're constantly saturating your mind with that idea, and the frequency of it starts to increase. And it may be slow in the beginning, but all of those glimpses of it, and you're reaffirming again, that's a big deal, right? Closing that feedback loop and saying, yes, I just saw this, and I'll state it out loud. I mean, as long as in a place where you can do that and say, oh yeah, I just saw a blue spark over here, right? I saw a shimmer on this side, or whatever it was, or yeah, I did get part of that outline, and then I had to go and do something else. So but it's like that, closing that feedback loop by affirming what it is that you see, literally, vocally, and that will connect that loop and make it stronger the next time. And that's that, attenuation again, where I'm like, striking the bell throughout the day and constantly putting it in there and feeding that through until, I just talked to, one of the membership people, the other day, and he was saying that was sort of happening for him on a regular basis, and that he noticed that a couple of times he wasn't even trying to do it. It just sort of occurred, but he's very diligent about doing that practice. And I said, yeah, after a while it becomes like you're not thinking about doing it. It's not that it's overwhelming and just happening to you. I mean, I'm not promoting that. You need the control to turn it on and off, but you start to utilize it in such a natural way. It's sort of like when somebody says something to you and you just, you're not thinking about like, should I listen to them more carefully? You just are, if they seem like they're serious at the time, right? Mm-hmm. Rather than just yakking to you, oh, how's it going? Or basic conversation. If they say, I really need to talk to you about this. And, it's like all of a sudden, it's like, you're focusing on them. You're not trying to do it, you just do it. And then you get more information from the tone of their voice and this and that. If you had to list all of those things that came out, it'd be overwhelming, But you've done it so often that it's normal for you just to do it without really thinking about the process of it.
Right.
And that's what you're trying to get to with this as well, or any of these techniques. It's like, assume that you are doing it, you're just not aware of doing it. And that, what would that look like from the experience that you've had so far? And, if that was enhanced, what would that look like? And, all of those things. And you're just sort of pondering that and sending those open-ended questions into the subconscious, right? Because as soon as you ask those questions, it's dying to answer them. So it wants to give you the experience of that answer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember one time you were talking about how the subconscious is nothing more than a production
right, it's just a manufacturing unit.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, so it's like whatever it gets the most tickets for, or whatever, that's what it produces. So in this case, it's like the more times you can be thinking, the more often you can be thinking about seeing, or reading books about seeing, or imagining what it would be like to see, or watching movies where, like yours, or looking at Alex Gray paintings or something like that.
Right.
The more times that you have those that going on in your conscious mind, the more the more tickets, let's say, the subconscious is going to get for producing that experience or moving you in that direction.
Correct. And I mean, technically what we're doing is, I mean, if we want to make it technical, it's sort of a controlled synesthesia, which is like a cross-referencing of the senses, right? So it's like, instead of just thinking about seeing through the day, it's like, maybe at night, one of the things that I do before I go to bed, which is always a prime time, right before I go to bed, say like 20 or 30 minutes before I go to bed, instead of watching something on TV or whatever, I'm going to pick up that Alex Gray book and just run through the pictures, saying like, wow, is that really, is that what it looks like? I'm asking those open-ended questions. It's like, that would be incredible if that's what it looks like. And can I see that? It's like asking those questions and just sort of really engaging as much as you can. So there's a visual representation of that. If there are, movie scenes that you can remember that show, what an aura would look like, or those types of things, I'm looking at those.
There's that scene in the Celestine Prophecy movie, right?
Correct, yeah. But there's also scenes like that, like when you think of like the old Star Wars movies, right, where Yoda's standing there with the aura around him after he's passed, right, physically passed, and Obi-Wan is there with the aura around him and all of that. And so it's there's all these scenes that come out with those types of things that we don't really, it's just part of the movie, so we don't register it then. But those are things that we can, when we focus on it, we can use those references to guide us and help us saturate our minds with these things. And
it doesn't have to be How to See Energy, the movie. It's like
yeah. It's like, it's not Brian's book of seeing energy, what it looks like, It's like there are lots of those things. Kirlian photography, right? So it's like seeing the outlines of the plants.
Right. So it's like if you work in an office or something and you have little breaks in between projects that you're working on, it's like even doing like a quick Google image search for aura or something.
Right.
Even though it's like
you'll come up with a lot of schlocky stuff, but then you'll come up with these things like that's a famous photo, right, with the plant leaf and how they cut the edge of the leaf off, and it's still got the outline of the original plant leaf, not just where it's cut.
I've never seen that.
Yeah.
But but that's the idea, right? Even if you think the images are corny or silly or cool or whatever, it's like all that stuff doesn't even really matter. It's more like you're literally just, it's like, oh, I'm spending more time thinking about this thing. Like it's still just putting in more of those, it's saturating the subconscious more, regardless of quality or, whatever, right?
It's suspending your, assumptions too. It's like that's why I'm saying if you constantly ask the questions, it actually spurs on, your subconscious to say, well, I guess it could look like that, but maybe it's easier if I show you. Rather than trying to verbally explain, like, yes, it's just like that, or, whatever. Or, no, it's not like that. It's like, there's not a bashing of it, or, like, that's it and that's not it. It's like, find your, let your subconscious show you what it looks like, and then you can make your own decision, and you'll see how difficult it is to actually, like, graphically show what that's like, and it's like, oh, it doesn't really look like any of those. It's much more beautiful. It's much more bright, or, has motion to it. And, how do you do that?
Right.
I'm sure if somebody in CGI could, do the technique, they'd be able to sort of reproduce it to some degree,
Right.
And so it's just, why not let your subconscious help you to push you in that direction to, close that feedback loop and give you the experience, rather than just trying to describe it all the time from a second person perspective.
Right.
Like, I don't want to just hear about other people's, my own experience will trump anything that I hear from others as far as their experiences, that may guide me into a certain territory. But once I'm in there, it's, how do I experience a walk in the forest that somebody has described, 1,000 times? And it's like, my experience is going to be sort of guided on how to get to the trailhead and where to walk and following that path. But my experience of the things that I pick out and think are fascinating or beautiful or whatever are going to be my own. And that trumps whatever anybody else's experience is for me, right? My experience always trumps whatever other people have experienced, because it's mine. And there's
And
no
s-
reason for me to prove it out to somebody else as long as I'm getting the results that I'm looking for.
right,
And if it and that for me, that's always what's the pragmatic aspect of it, and does it help me in my daily life? Does
right,
it help me further my goals, whatever in whatever territory that we're engaged in at the time? And
right.
that's always been sort of my practicality of it. You know, it's not to prove to anybody else that this is a practical technique. You know, it's not something where it's like, oh, if you can see, you can make $1 million. You know, or if you can,
Mm,
if you can see, you'll, you know, you'll have the perfect relationship. You'll find your soulmate. Blah blah blah. You know,
mm,
it's like, you know, that may be your goal, and that's okay. But how is seeing going to affect that for you is going to be individual, right? The ability is one thing, but you know, how are you going to utilize it in a practical way for your end result?
mm-hmm.
That's going to evolve over time, and you know, we can give you some guidance on that, but again, everybody's a fingerprint, so there's going to be some variance there, and it's not like, I think we have to get over the idea that we have to prove it out to other people.
Well, you've often talked about how it's the again to in reference to the whole to be silent idea, how it's like you have this superhero kind of persona that's like exists behind the scenes
Yeah,
within you, that's kind of charging you up all the time, or yeah, it's like a secret that you keep that makes you that energizes you and fuels you throughout the day,
right,
but that you don't have to necessarily like, you know, try to convince other people of or whatever.
right, right. And I think that's sort of like in a sort of an idea with those superhero stories, that's always there, right? They're always trying to keep their identity secret, and they're always trying to, you know, like really, you know, blend into society afterwards, and you know, they're nothing more than this or that or whatever, right? And so, and I think that that's part of it. It's like a way to know that you can affect change for yourself, but you know, it's not really something that you want to shout from the rooftops, and at the same time, because it's that having that feeling of, you know, that something is, you know, everybody wants to feel special in some way or another, and you know, so instead of having it come from the exterior and having other people say that you're special, you know, can you generate that excitement that, you know, says you're special, but it's to you.
Mm.
You know, it's like a lot of it takes care of a lot of things of feeling worthy, and you know, your self-worth, and all of that stuff, right? It's like, I think it's a way to sort of, you know, not just pretend that you are, but to know that you are.
Mm.
And you know that you are. Knowing is the experience, right? Knowledge is really experience. I mean, the stuff that we get on the internet or articles and all that stuff is just information, right? Until you put it into practice and have the experience of doing well in business or having a great relationship or whatever, that's your experience. That's what really matters, you know. So, you know, it's like engaging it as that experience, then it becomes knowledge, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
something that you know inside, that what you've done, that, you know, in this case, let's say, using these techniques and expanding those techniques and having experience of those phenomena makes you feel great. And then you're applying yourself to whatever it is that you're doing. And from that really energetic feeling that most people use motivational things for or whatever to get up, but you know, the problem with that for a lot of people is that it, you know, it lasts for that short period of time. It lasts for that weekend while they're at the seminar. It lasts while they've, you know, they're able to sustain the ideas that they've read in the book, or put, you know, something on paper, you know, that they've read about finance, or however it goes, right? And they have it, but it's hard to sustain. Well, when you're doing these practices all the time, and you know, and you're keeping them through the day, it's not hard to keep your motivation up. You know, you're having these little experiences through the day, and then they get to be more and more and more. And of course, when you're feeling up like that all the time, you know, it's just the practical idea. It's like, if you're feeling down and you know, tired and, stressed and overwhelmed and all of those things, it's hard to get this normal stuff in the day done with a good attitude. You do it, but you're sort of dragging yourself through it. You do it because you have to, but it's not, you're not doing it with the zeal that you would if you felt like, wow, I'm really rested, I'm really excited, I'm really happy to be here. It's like, think about as a kid when you go to your first job and it's a combination of being scared, you don't know what to do, but when you do it, you want to please, and you're really in there, and you got all this energy, and everybody else who's been there for a few years maybe are going like, oh my God, and
the new
guy, he's like doing all our work for us, he's making us look bad. It's like, and that's the same kind of thing, right? So it's the same thing with this. If you could sustain that engagement like that in your daily life, think how much better your daily life would be, and how much more successful you'd be with every single thing if you could carry that level of enthusiasm into everything.
Right.
I mean, it's crazy, but that's really what it is. And so, and of course, these are all, when you tie them all together and this feedback loop comes back again, it's like, and like I was alluding to in the beginning, like, there's the visual technique of doing that, and obviously the reading technique of reading things before you go to bed, so that it's sort of like your subconscious has some material to ponder.
Yeah, let's
at night.
I want to emphasize that state, because we think about, okay, we have 16 hours for most people of waking time during the day.
Yep.
And so we can use things like the pictures and the audio books, or the reading references, or just daydreaming about it, or putting the practices into play. There's all these things to keep us in the zone. But can you talk a little bit more about those techniques around capitalizing on those 8 hours beyond just lucid dreaming, which I think we'll talk about a little bit more towards the end of the course, but for seeing, but even just with regular dreaming and regular sleeping, how we capitalize on those 8 hours too, of keeping our minds in that place.
I mean, a lot of people speculate about dreams, right? And it's like, but we know that the subconscious, we sort of fall away from the conscious mind and into the subconscious. And so, the reason dreams often seem confusing and jumbled is because, you're experiencing them as symbols in reality, not as a linear way of looking at things, right? The way we do in our conscious waking day, right? Where one thing goes after the next, right? And in dreams, it just seems to be like a jumble and just really crazy stuff. But if you take it literally as all being symbolism, then it's sort of like when you ask a question right before you go to bed, or as you're falling asleep, which is even better, right? So you've taken that 20 minutes before bed and you've saturated your mind with, even things you've read before, right? You're just putting them in there so that your mind sort of goes, oh, okay, we're in this mode again. And then, or looking at the pictures or whatever it is, right? And then it's like, and then you ask a question as you're going to sleep, that you want your subconscious to, bring to the forefront. That's the new, that's the new ticket for what you want produced, right? And so, and you ask it like, how can I see, not how can I see something like that, because it'll just tell you, open the book again. You want to know, is that really what it looks like? Is that really how I will, perceive it, or whatever, something like that? Is that really, what's my perception of those things? What will it look like to me? And, and then go to sleep, repeat that over and over again as you're falling asleep. You don't have to do it so many times or whatever, just like as you're falling asleep, you want to really impress it in there if you can. And then always interpret your dreams through that lens. You write the question down even before, so you can't jumble it in your mind afterwards. If you don't write it down, it's really easy for you to, augment the question to match what you got in your dream.
Right.
Like, oh, it really means this. I guess I asked that kind of question. No, it's like, write it down. This was the question, so I have to interpret everything through that lens. And that will give me a more clear picture of what the answer is. And, or what can I do to promote this seeing.
Would there be as much value beyond just that activity of like asking a specific question, analyzing your dreams and as an answer to that question? Is there also value in just falling asleep thinking about seeing or imagining yourself seeing or whatever?
I think there's value in all of that. So just remember that whatever your dream is that you remember, it's through the filter of that you're going to bed with, whatever it is. If you go to bed worrying about finances, you're going to have dreams that symbolize worrying about finances. If you don't ask specifically, how do I solve this problem? You're going to just get like,
Right.
here's my symbolic representation of your worries and overwhelm.
Right.
And so
Right.
people have these nightmares, or they have whatever, right, about being completely overwhelmed by something or whatever.
Right. Right.
So when we ask a specific question, it will try to answer in a way that's symbolic, obviously, and in a way that will answer that question to the best of its ability.
But will it also facilitate moving us in that direction?
Absolutely. I mean, everybody wants their question answered, right?
Right.
Hey, Brian, what can I do to see?
Right, right. But
Start
I just
with
mean
this.
like it is consciously understanding the meaning of the dream a necessary aspect of having spent that dream time contemplating that goal?
No, I think, it's always nice if we get
Right.
an answer that's understandable to us. Again,
Right.
it takes a while to sort of switch your head into that symbolic mode.
Well, that's what
right?
I mean, because like for a lot of people, even for myself, it's like it's like, okay, well, because dreams are symbolic, and it's not always a one, 3-step process to understanding our own subconscious mind
Sure.
and even the symbolism that we're using for ourselves that quickly. It's like, well, can I still get benefit from falling asleep thinking about this goal that I have, regardless of whether I know that I understand the messages perfectly or not?
Yeah, because there are we've had students that say they don't remember their dreams at all.
Right.
I mean, we can convince them, and everybody can convince them, that they're still dreaming. They just don't remember.
Right.
We know that's the case. But so they don't really need to. They don't really have to remember their dreams, and meaning they don't have to interpret the result of the dream, right? So, but even just putting those questions in and letting the subconscious, it'll bubble up. The
Yeah,
end result will bubble up into the conscious mind after a while.
Right. Like it's almost like a lot of the time during the day, do you think those like flashes of like aha, oh, those kinds of things are from things that have been percolating in our dreams and our subconscious that then
Right.
in that moment of openness
Absolutely.
or whatever, it's like we click it together during the day and we're like, oh, where'd that come from? I get that now. I understand that now. It's like,
Yeah, it's sort of like, I feed in through the course of the day from my conscious mind, I'm feeding in tons of information, just tons of information all at once. And I think a lot of people do this all day long, right? They just feed in tons of information about whatever, and a lot of random stuff too. Like, even the people that are watching, cats hugging stuffed animals on YouTube, it's just information, right? They're not really doing anything with it other than entertainment value or whatever, right?
Right.
So
Yeah,
a
yeah.
break in the day from the daily grind or whatever it is. But if you're consciously feeding information all around this subject, it's still just information, right? And so when you ask a question, you're asking your subconscious to formulate that information into a structure that will produce, a technique or exercise or something that you can do to
or some kind of guidance within that technique, right?
Right.
That's
This is,
specific.
I'm going to rearrange, I'm going to arrange your day so that we can get to a point where you're going to be able to see this, or, that it's coming through at different places. And are you observant enough to pick it up?
Right.
Yeah.
And
if you go through a day that, you haven't seen anything, or you haven't had that experience to whatever degree, then I just usually I don't think, oh, it didn't happen. I think I didn't catch it. I didn't observe it. I wasn't observant enough. So I put more concentration on being more observant through the day, which stimulates that in your mind more as well, right? You're not losing your awareness, right? So in a way, it's sort of like a magical mindfulness, if you will. So it's not just I'm being mindful of every little action that I do in the day. It's like I'm literally driving it toward a specific end.
right.
And I'm looking for specific sort of indicators through the day that sort of bring me to that place. And so just on that same idea with, because not everybody's visual, right? So it's like, how does that synesthesia work with seeing? So just to kind of make a broad, it's like when you intentionally cross over, these senses, it's sort of like when like I'll listen to a piece of music, but I'll listen to it with my eyes closed and imagine what scenery is coming up, what does that, look like, whether it's just, light that's coming through at that time or whatever it is. I'm imagining, I'm giving myself that idea, like, I'm going to put this piece of classical music on, let's just say, and it lasts 20 minutes. And it's really beautiful and whatever, but how, what images come to me during that time? So I'm crossing over, what does this sound look like? So again, I'm crossing over, so I'm using, now my auditory sense, with, crossing it over to a visual representation of that audio signal that I'm hearing, right? So again, just another type of vibration, right? What does that vibration, translate to in, a visual? So it's sort of like the cymatics, right, from Jennings, right, where it's like, they put the plates and then the sand on the plates and they strike it with a bow, and it's, the plates are sort of ground down to be tuned to a certain frequency or whatever. When they take a bow and sort of run it along that, it creates a visual pattern, right, that's repeatable over and over again. So, and that's a visual representation of that frequency that's being struck on those plates at the time or whatever. So it's sort of, we're doing that same thing, and that's another one that's, pretty valuable for crossing over the senses. But you could do the same thing, like, what does the, if I close my eyes and just feel the surface of this couch, what does the, what does that look like to me? What's the visual representation of that?
And how is that ultimately leading towards seeing energy?
You're able to take all of your senses and focus them on, a visual representation of whatever it is that you're looking at the time. So, what does the color blue feel like? What does the color red feel like? Can you identify them by sense of touch? Can you identify them? What's it sound like? What's it taste like?
Do you think that is that just like a way to produce a more flexible, interconnected sensory experience in your mind that will make almost like loosening you up in a way?
In a way, I mean, it does loosen you up in that way, but at the same time, it's bringing all of your senses to bear on a visual representation of what that is. So you're getting, like, in my way of thinking, you're getting a more, a more total picture of seeing energy, in this case. So it's like, it's just a vibration, right, that we're interpreting, right? It's not really, we're not seeing it with our physical eyes,
right,
even though it looks like that to us, and we interpret it as that, right? But it's not really something that's a structural thing within our eyes to be able to do that, right? It's like all vision. It's a mental picture that we're getting, right?
But the way that you, but again, just to, I always like to balance that statement with, like, seeing is still seeing.
Right. It's still seeing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's like,
absolutely.
when you see energy, you see it as if you're seeing it with your physical eyes. But the point that you're making is that, like, it's not with your physical eyes, and so that can often be a hindrance to progress.
It can,
thinking
because
that it is.
people, they'll stress and they'll try to look harder.
Right.
If that's the case, like you're trying to see some detail of
Right.
whatever it is.
So what you're saying is, since this is a perceptual shift that happens in your mind, you're by doing these other techniques of synesthesia, like where you're seeing the texture or you're seeing the sound or whatever, it's like you're, then when you ask your mind, what is the energy, that's something that's extremely subtle that we're not totally conscious of, what does that look like? It's like, oh yeah, I'm a little bit more familiar with, like, I'm a little bit more familiar or comfortable with giving you a visual experience of subtler crossover experiences, something
Right.
that's a little bit more amorphous that we haven't really engaged consciously that much. So it's
Yeah.
like another little bridge.
It's sort of like it's not so unfamiliar anymore. So it's like, I can play that game with you now. You know, we've played that game with audio. We've played that game with, you know, sense of smell. We've played that game with a sense of taste. We've played that game with a sense of, you know, tactile sensation. You know, and we've played it visually too. So it's like, and here's all these representations of that.
Right.
Right. And so one more isn't going to be that big a deal. It's sort of like it just sort of eases into it and crosses over. You know, it's like, you know, will it, you know, we've played this game enough where you know, the subconscious speaking would say, we've played this game enough now. I know this isn't going to shatter your, you know, your mind
Right.
when this happens.
Right.
So, you know, we've done this a while now. And you may find that one is even, you know, something is even better than, you know, than other things. Everybody has a strong sense, right? And then the ones that go below that. So, and everybody's a little bit different.
Sure.
So one may be stronger, and it's always nice to get the, you know, the one that's the strongest on board with this, right? Whether it be sense of smell or taste, which would probably be the most obscure, but, you know, what does blue taste like? What does green taste like? You know, all of those things, right? And, but for some people, their sense of taste is the primary sense, right? So,
Sure.
you know, if we think of people like a chef or something like that has to combine and blend things to make exquisite food, right? And, you know, sense of smell, it would be like, you know, like somebody who is, you know, combining perfumes or things like that, right? So that's like those people that we've heard of that, you know, insure their noses for $10 million because that's their livelihood, right?
Right.
That type of thing. So same thing with musicians and hearing, and, you know, trying to think of people that would be, you know, primarily tactile, but I'm sure they're out there. I mean, as far as trying to think of something that would be their profession, maybe masseuse, you know, where, you know, they sense things under their fingers that, you know, most people would just be like, oh, that's just muscle. I don't see the difference between this and this. It's too subtle. But because they do it all day long, every day, it becomes their, a way of them seeing, you know, with their hands. And so, you know, for them, that would be a crossover as well. So, yeah. So I think that's, you know, how we sort of blend all those things and how I saturate my system with that idea rather than just thinking about seeing all day long.
Right.
You know, it's like I add these things in, and again, and then combining it with asking these open-ended questions at night before I go to bed, it promotes my experience for the next day.
Right.
And if you continue that process, it cuts the learning curve way down, and will bring your experiences way up. You know, so.
Yeah, so that was like a 3-part video.
That was like a 3-part video of how to do it.
Synesthesia, you know, asking yourself those open-ended questions before you go to bed, and, you know, saturating your mind throughout the day with ideas about seeing and projecting yourself into that place with books and visual representations, or an audio book, or, you know,
Right.
all these different. So it's really just yeah. It's just interesting because that idea branched into all those different ways of achieving that goal, and it's good. I
think it's part of the value of this program is that, you know, a lot of these, they're not lectures. You know, a lot of it is, you know, conversations, but that's how the normal, you know, that's how the, you know, the interaction between teacher and student usually is, right? It's like there's this back and forth, and, you know, it morphs into, you know, some tangents, even though they're sort of circling around the same topic.
Right.
And because it's in explaining it, you know, I'm stressing myself to try to remember the things that I would do if I were starting over, and the things that I've gone through, or the things that I've used with, you know, other students, and trying to, you know, elaborate them, you know, in some ways, right? So it's like, it's easier for me to do it this way than it is to try to make this, you know, 10-point bullet point, you know, first do this, then do this, then do this, then do this. You know, it's sort of like, it doesn't really work that way as well. I mean, we could do it, but it's a lot more effort on our part, and it doesn't always come off. It seems too formal, too strict, you know, too boxed in, and everybody fits the same mold, and it's not. It's very flexible, and people need to know that it's, you know, there's not one correct way of doing it. You know, that it's, you know, some territories are going to work better for you and others aren't, and don't be stressed by that. You know, it's like, find your way. We'll give you the principles and how to do it, but you may find an extremely unique way that's going to work the best for you. And when you find it and it clicks, it's just there. And you know, you might not even be able to say what it was that you did afterwards, which happens a lot. You know, it just, you did the right combination at the right time, and
So
and
these
that's
are
what it did.
experiments for us to find our way.
Yeah, and,
But they're
and in
not-
a way, a game. You know, in some ways, you know, if we want to add that fun element into it and how to engage it, right? It's like,
It's just that it's not a mold that we press ourselves into.
no, I mean, about the only part of the mold that we press ourselves into is doing it.
Right.
But other than that, it's sort of like, okay, let me find a way that this works in the best for me. You know, and for some people it will be this rigid, you know, like I do it every 10 minutes or, you know, once an hour for 2 minutes or however that is, and that, you know, regimented structure is really good for them and they're comfortable in that. And for other people, they can't do that, so it's sort of like just reminding themselves that they're going into it, and but always having that sort of, you know, joyful effort, you know, that game idea in my mind that it's an adventure. You know, I'm going into this to see, you know, what's going to happen to me today. Much like the first day of work, right? What's going to happen to me today? It's a little
Right.
scary, and at the same time, I'm not quite sure what I'm doing, but, you know, I want this end result, and I'm going to go for it and see what happens. And it's a lighthearted thing. It's not so pressing on us.
Right. I'm
Yeah,
gonna
so-
run these experiments and do these techniques and practice these ways of achieving seeing, and ultimately they'll become my own, and I'll make it a personal technique and ability of being able to see energy, being able to turn it on and off, and being able to interpret it to use it. But it's going to be in my own way, and you know, it's not like, you know, like there's kind of a, yeah. I don't know. I was trying to think of an example of how we, you know, I guess it's kind of just a remnant of like that kind of idea of like you know, high school or grade school education,
Sure.
where it's like, you know, we kind of, except for those schools where where they're more a little bit more open or geared toward more creative,
Right.
you know, education. It's like they're just trying to get everybody to pass the test, or
Right.
you know,
Teach to
whatever.
the test.
Yeah,
Yeah. So it's like you memorize these things, and if you're good at memorizing and you can spit it back out, then you pass. You know,
right.
No idea of, you know, is this information retained, or can I do anything with this information? It's just, you know, well, you learned it, and now you can repeat it. You know, you memorized it, and now you can repeat it back on the test to prove to somebody external that you memorized that stuff that they said was important, but not how to utilize it.
Right.
You know, so, and you know, for us, it's a little bit more, you know, that even the experience of doing it, even the experience of engaging the doing of it, is energy promoting for you. You know, and of course that when you're feeling excited and that energy is up, like we said in the beginning, you know, it makes your day go a hell of a lot smoother than it normally would.
Yeah.
You're not dragging yourself through the day. It's sort of like, you know, and you're pouring that energy and focusing on whatever it is that you need to do in that day. But, you know, on the side, you're having all these little glimpses of things, and that's really, you know, and that's, you know, stroking you up, and and that'll, you know, it feeds back on itself as well. So, you know, you get home at the end of the day, it's like you don't need any more encouragement at that point to do your techniques, do your practices, whatever, right? It's like,
Right.
it supersedes the sitcom at that point, because, you know, you start to see how sort of, you know, ridiculous that stuff is and just a waste of time, right? So it's like, it's okay if you're going to do that, and it's just giving you some relaxation. You don't want to think anymore. You just want to zone out. Good, no problem. But, you know, to make it just a habit because that's what you do, it's just digging the rut deeper. So, you know, when you have something that's, I mean, there's nobody in there, nobody that I know of that, you know, given the choice between something that's just sort of like neutral and boring or whatever, and, you know, how, whatever words you want to attach to that, you know, compared to that or something that's exciting and enlivening to you, then, you know, they're always going to go for that, I think. I've never met anybody that just says like, no, I don't want to be excited and have fun. I just want to sit here and drone. So, it's like that's how, what you do during the day can help promote more of your practices and where you start to find, real value in them.
Well, I think part of it too is that like it's hard to build up and sustain that excitement to do the practices if you don't, if without, almost without keeping your mind in that place a little bit here, a little bit there all the time, because it's like, oh, yeah, I don't know. I've just found that way of keeping your mind in that place all the time, I get that. Like it's extremely energizing, and it makes it a lot easier to do, even if it's like if you to do a practice at the end of the day or whatever, even if you're, your mind's kind of fried from a long day or whatever,
Right,
it's like
right.
you still have that excitement, and you can carry that forward into the practice without trying to, I don't know, without getting discouraged or feeling like I'm just wasting my time. It's never going to happen for me or something like that.
Right. Well, it's the difference between, doing a technique, doing a practice because somebody told you that it will make you better, or it'll make you different, or will give you a different experience. There's a difference between that, which everybody starts out that way, and the transition into knowing that every time you go in and do something, it's changing you in some way. And the proof in that changing is that your experience is different the next day, or when you get up and move out. As soon as you get your butt off the chair or whatever it was, from doing a practice, you have changed. And so, and your experience of that time after that, solidifies that idea. So it's not hard to keep the momentum going when it's like that. If you ever stop having that experience, that's when interest wanes and you start dropping the practice or letting other things kind of interfere with it. So as long as you're getting continual feedback, that things are changing for the better, then, you're going to keep doing that.
And by keeping your mind in that place, it's like you're accelerating the change, and you're
You're
accelerating
accelerating the
results.
progress, at least, I would say, at least 4 times faster than you normally would.
Right.
If you were just doing the techniques and waiting for something to happen
Right.
during the technique the
Right.
next day or
Right,
whatever.
right.
It's like, no, it's through
Wait.
the day that we're looking for the end result.
Right. And
Yeah.
that progress will drive excitement, will drive more progress, will drive more excitement. And that's how
Exactly.
we get these
That's the
things to come
momentum
online.
from the feedback loop, right?
Right. Yeah.
It's like,
So then the
that's it.
less that we dissipate our energy, the less we dissipate our attention, the more we can keep honing ourselves in on that thing that we're going after.
Right.
The compound interest of that will bring it on.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Because, remember that being able to see is just the first, entry level end result that you're looking for. Because really the real end result is, what can I do with that? And that takes time to implement and integrate into your life. First you have a clear idea of what it is that you want, a clear understanding of why you want that. And then, there's the open-ended question again, coming back to the subconscious. It's like, how can my seeing help me promote that at the quickest rate possible? Or something like that, right? And so you'll come up with these ideas, either, through your dreaming at night or the aha moments during the day, right? It's like, or opportunities will come, into play where all of a sudden you're having a conversation with somebody and, some of that seeing starts to bleed through. And, at that point, it's like, oh, I'm getting this interpretation from this conversation or whatever it is. So obviously if it's, if my focus is relationships or something like that, then, I'm going to get more information from that seeing, and that's going to help me make the right choices, say the right things at the right time, and get me into a position of, building that relationship in a good way, in a better way. Or, saving time and cutting it off, not wasting time, going through things that are never going to produce anything for you.
Right.
So there's just as much value in that. Cutting out the waste of time is just as valuable, if not more valuable, than time well spent and put into use for attaining a certain goal that you want. So, you know, if we could all, you know, eliminate the time sinks through the day, you wouldn't have to worry about how much time you have in the day. You'd have plenty.
Right.
So you know, if seeing can help, you know,
Sure.
eliminate that, take that off the table, that's already a big plus. You know, so.
Yeah, right. And I think it's a good thing to contemplate and put out there, and like you're saying, ask yourself those open-ended questions, because, you know, at least in the beginning, a lot of time we come to things like being able to see energy with preconceived ideas about the only thing I can use it for. But just as personal as the practice becomes, the use of that ability will be just as personal for each person who does it.
Right. Because there's a lot of experimentation there, right?
Yeah, and you can't always explain, you know, it's like, or give a cookie cutter answer for what are the benefits of being able to see energy, because it's like, because
Right.
everybody's going to take it in their own direction and use it to enhance their lives in their own way once they can do it.
Exactly. But the, you know, again, the entry level is being able to do it consistently.
Right.
And interpreting it for you correctly so that it's consistent, right? You know what this is, and you know what this means, and you know you have experience of having that multiple times, so that it just becomes automatic. It's sort of like hearing somebody say no. No means no. You know, it's like you don't have to interpret it. Well, does he really mean no? Does he read between the lines? And you know, it's like, you know, well, you heard my son Tobiah talking about that yesterday. Well, Mom said no, but did she say no, or did she say no? Don't even think about that. You know, it's like you know, and he was interpreting between those two different things, even though, you know, if you didn't know the person, you'd be saying both mean no, and he's like, well, not really. One means I'm thinking about it. It's probably no, but you know, so it's like, but. You know, so he's reading through all of that stuff because it's his experience, right? That's been his experience through his life so far. So, you know, it's funny. And so all of our experiences are going to be different, right? So when I see something, when, you know, in somebody and interacting with them, or I see something in my work day that I'm interacting with, and that type of thing, or, you know, it doesn't have to be work, right? It could be anything, conversation between two people, or, you know, when I'm working on, you know, my finances, how things will bleed through, or some, you know, certain things, you know, when I'm seeing them, certain things will kind of come through. And if that's the case, it's like I've interpreted that over, you know, years of experience to say, that's a good thing to do. You know, I'm going to focus on this because that's showing up as being the thing that's going to produce my end result quicker, you know, whatever that is. And so that's all different for anybody, for everyone, you know, because it's like, it comes from their experience of using that in multiple ways and interpreting it correctly. Because in the beginning, there's plenty of times when you'll see things that you interpret not correct. And so there's that, you know, that learning curve, right, of figuring that out. And a lot of times we can give you the principles, but not so much the exact, you know, really like red means this. You know, it's like, it doesn't mean that for everyone, you know, because it depends on your correspondences, right? And so you need to figure that out on your own. There's no way for anybody else to do it for you. But again, the first thing is be able to do the technique consistently. And then you go from there.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, man.
Hey, it's great.